Hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to more of Sara's War. If you would like to follow Brenda's Books online, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Today we are on Chapter 58. Here we go. Chapter 58. Wake Up! The nighttime shift begins, and I'm so glad I'm not a part of it. Regardless of the extra sleep I've been getting, I still feel exhausted. I resist Randy's and Molly's protests to sleep in my own bed rather than the fold-out one next to Jack. There's no way I'm doing that. I'm not leaving his side without a good reason. Molly and Randy both give me a hug goodnight and leave me alone with my unconscious love. I slouch in my wicker chair and lean my head back on the not-so-smooth sticks. The small lamplight on the table next to me presents the only glow in the clinic room. Jack, I say out loud, your color is better, your blood pressure is better, your heart is better, your brain waves are better. Why are you not awake? I lift my head to look at him, hoping for a response. Nothing. Yet I feel like he heard me. I keep talking out loud. Nate's gone, you know. It's so hard losing a friend, especially right before your very eyes. I'm sure you know what that's like. It's horrible, isn't it? I continue to speak out loud to Jack. I tell him everything from the moment I left him on the side of the road at Bridgetown to everything I learned from Petty Officer Harrison. Isn't that good news, Jack? The turncoats are history. The Navy can build itself up again, and the rest of the Daggard Rose will get some kind of awful sentence. Although I wish I stop short, refusing to finish that thought. I peek at Jack's monitors. Nothing's changed. I rub my hands down my face and slouch farther in the chair. I can't take this anymore, Jack. I miss you so much. I can't believe I didn't accept you when I had the chance. I can't believe I did that. Now all I want is to be with you. I want it more than anything. My voice cracks with the strain. I sit up and stare at Jack's handsome, relaxed face. His scattered bruises and cuts are almost entirely healed now. I lean toward him and speak in an urgent tone, as if doing so will make a difference. You have to wake up, Jack. The longer you stay in this state, the greater your chances of not being the same. Please, you have to wake up. I won't be an idiot anymore, I promise. I'll do anything to be with you. I stand and walk over to where he lies on the hospital bed and crawl up next to him, careful not to pull out any of his attached tubes. I wrap an arm around his unmoving body. My tears soak his hideous thin hospital robe. I miss you, Jack. I miss you so much. I continue to cry as I imagine what he would do if he were awake. He would hold me and caress my back, just as he has before. He would speak softly and kindly, and somehow make me feel safe. Somehow I would know that everything would be all right. Sara. I jump in place. I shift to glance up at Jack's face to see if he had just spoken. His eyes are still closed, and his body still hasn't moved. I lean over to study the EEG for a moment. His brainwaves indicate he's awake. Jack, I whisper. Jack, can you hear me? Sara, he rasps. Jack! I exclaim. I reach up and brush my fingers down his face. Jack, try to open your eyes. You can do it. Jack's eyes flutter a few times before they stay open. I laugh through my tears. Then I kiss him all over his face, over and over and over. Jack manages a tired smile. What else can you move? Can you move your fingers and toes? I think so, he says, as he does just that. I cry and laugh harder and longer than I ever remember doing as I lie my head against his chest. I'm glad you're happy to see me, Jack rasps, when I've finally calmed down some. You have no idea, I croak. Does this mean you're giving me a chance? He asks. I nod against his chest. Absolutely. He moves to wrap his arm around me, but his IV prevents him from doing so. Why am I connected to all of these things? I sit up to look at him. You needed a few transfusions and lots of fluids, I tell him, wiping the tears off my cheeks. Why? What happened? You don't remember? No, Jack says. Is this the hospital at the Big Rock base? He asks, glancing around the room. Yes, I say, sitting up some more. I lift his wrist to check his pulse. It's a little elevated, but that's to be expected coming out of a coma. Were we on a submarine together? He asks. Yes. You remember that? Jack moves his mouth into what I think is supposed to be a grimace. I was hoping that was a dream. What do you remember last? I wanted to punch a guy to the pulp. I lift my eyebrows up and down. Oh, where was that? On the submarine. He was coming on to you and I wanted to throttle him. I can't remember if I did or not. I shake my head. You didn't. You would have blown my cover. Your cover? Oh, that's right. Wow. Jack's face contorts into so many different emotions I can't pin down a single one. Then he freezes and locks his eyes with mine. You kissed me. I nod. And you told me you loved me, right? I smile. You told me first. Jack chuckles, then clutches his shoulder. I reach up too, and he feathers his fingers over mine and holds my hand over his heart. I felt that way for a long time, he says. I have too. I just didn't realize it, I tell him. His intense gaze lingers. You thought I was going to die, didn't you? I nod. You almost did. He takes my hand and brings it to his lap. He glances down at our intertwined fingers and thumbs my palm. There's nothing like a deathbed to make you see clearly. That's for sure. Those moments can also be really stressful and intense, and some people say things they wouldn't normally say. That's true, I agree, not knowing where he's going with this. He looks up at me then. Do you still mean it? What? That you love me? I laugh at that. Yes, absolutely, Jack. I love you. I want to be with you. Waiting for you to wake up was torture. How long was I out? He asks with raised eyebrows. About a week, I reply. His eyes bulge. Really? That is bad. He sighs and closes his eyes briefly before meeting mine again. Since I can barely move, will you come over here and kiss me? I smile and lean into him. His lips press against mine with tender urgency. 1, 2, 3 times. I rest my head against his good shoulder. He raises his arm with the least amount of cords attached to it and strokes my hair. I love you so much, Sara. I'm so glad you were here when I woke up. Me too. So, tell me everything, he says. What would you like to know? First, how in the world did you end up by yourself on that submarine, trying to save me from the Daggard Rose? Well, I tried to go to General Granger for help, but he wouldn't listen. I start spouting off the General's excuses in my best Granger voice with my best Granger gestures, which has Jack roaring with laughter, along with him grasping his side and shoulder saying, "Ow, ow." And then he called Ame the Rose Man, I say. Jack laughs at that. And for the next hour or so, everything Jack and I say somehow seems hilarious. Finally, when Jack can't take it anymore, I insist on giving him some pain meds and a checkup, which I should have done much sooner. How do you know Ame? Asks Jack. I refill his IV bag with morphine as I tell him the story of my journey to Big Rock and how I saved Ame's son. Wow. Did any prisoners escape while you were treating him? I cringe. Yes. And if you had been there, you probably would have known. But the rest of us didn't figure it out until it was too late. What does that mean? Too late for what? I bite my lip as my heart sinks. Jack sits up straighter. What is it? What happened? I tilt my head to look at the ceiling, refusing to cry again. I've cried too much today. I'm so done with it. Sara? I turn to face Jack. You really don't remember? Jack shakes his head. I really don't. In fact, since we got so sidetracked with our little jokes, you haven't really told me much of anything, except for the fact that you saved Ander. I sigh as I walk over to his bed and lie down in the nook of his arm again. I just really wanted to end this night on a happy note. Jack strokes my arm. At least tell me if Chris is okay, he whispers. He is, I promise. Jack's chest falls with relief. And Lexy? She's okay too. Jack blows out a slow stream of air. Then it must be somebody else you really care about. I nod against his shoulder. Jack hesitates with his next question. Is it your nurse, Randy? I shake my head. What about Nate? I saw him get taken prisoner. Wait. He shifts to look at me. I remember Nate on the submarine. And that guy that I hate. I knew he was communicating with the leader, so I knew our plan wasn't going to work. I distracted him by going out a different door in hopes that you and Nate could escape before he came for you. I nod. Thank you for that. Well, did it work? Jack shakes his head as if to clear it. I don't remember anything after that. I put a forearm over my eyes. I wish I didn't either. Jack turns his head to look at me, but I keep my arm in place. Sara, what happened? Nate didn't make it, I croak. Oh no, he whispers. Jack wraps me tightly in his arms, and I cry myself to sleep. I dream of Jack speaking to me in his deep voice. I try to answer back, but somehow Chris's rich cadence jumps in instead. I open my eyes, blinking in the brightness of the fluorescent lights. Realizing my dream is now a reality, Jack is standing on his own 2 feet. His cords and catheters are still attached. Chris stands in front of him. Jack leans a lot of his weight on Chris, while resting one hand on his shoulder. Jack is a good head taller than Chris. Both men have their heads bowed and are shedding some quiet tears. I hold very still as to not interrupt the moment. Chris speaks in a soft, rich voice. I'm so sorry I didn't get to the dock in time. You were so outnumbered and I couldn't even help you, Chris says, choking back a sob. You were shot. It's okay, says Jack. And I knew they would take you to the hatch, but if I went there, they would recognize me and we would both be dead. Chris shakes his head. I can't believe you were basically tortured and I wasn't there to get you out. This time his sob is audible as his head bows lower. Stop, says Jack, with a slight shake of Chris's shoulder. There's nothing you could have done. I was more worried about you anyway. I hated seeing you fall in the ocean and then not knowing if you got out. I thought I lost you. Jack chokes on the last word. Chris thumps Jack on the side of his arm. We both made it. How did you get out of that? Asks Jack. I tried to jump in after you, but 3 men were on me before I could. I figured, says Chris. Nate and Sara saved me. Really? Sara hasn't told me about that yet. Jack glances over at me now. He catches me before I can close my eyes again and pretend I'm asleep. Hey there, pretty lady. I'm sorry if we woke you. Oh no, I'm just happy you two are catching up. Jack smiles and slaps Chris on the back. Then a brawny brunette appears in the doorway. May I come in now? Hey, Jack says cheerfully. He shuffles his feet toward her, but stops when a tube holds him back. Get over here, he says, motioning to Lexy with his hand. Lexy dashes across the floor, nearly knocking Jack over as she tackles him with a hug. Jack laughs and attempts to wrap his arms around her, but again is stuck due to his various tubing. Lexy pulls away and wipes her eyes. I'm so sorry, Jack. I had no idea Brontes had escaped. Otherwise I would have come up with a different plan. But I'm so glad you're okay. I'm so glad and I'm so sorry, she says, as she hugs him again with more tears spilling over. This time Jack manages to get one arm around her. I'm glad you're okay too. Then he turns to Chris and mouths, What's she talking about? You don't remember? Chris whispers. Jack shakes his head, and the 2 men turn to me with questioning looks. Jack has a little amnesia. What? Chris and Lexy say together, with Lexy spinning around to face me. I sit up in the bed. It's common after a coma. He remembers the essentials, like us, for instance. Lexy turns back to Jack. What don't you remember? Jack shrugs. I forgot. Chris snickers. Lexy slaps Jack's arm with the back of her hand. You know what I mean. Jack grimaces with pain. Lexy pivots to face me. Don't tell me Jack is going to be fragile now. I shift my legs over the bed and stand. Well, he did get shot twice, and he did lose 60% of his blood, and had to have 4 transfusions. Not to mention he's been lying flat in a coma for a week without moving an inch. I'm amazed he can stand like he is, to be honest. Lexy sighs slowly and rubs a firm hand over her forehead. Hey, I'll be fine, says Jack, nudging her in the arm. Chris moves to Lexy and pulls her into his side and kisses her on the head. We all did our best. You were amazing in the sky. You crushed it. Or should I say, it's. You crushed so many things. Lexy gazes up at him. I love you. Chris grins. Don't forget who said it first. Oh, fine, says Lexy as she puts her arms around his shoulders and kisses him on the lips, to which Chris gladly reciprocates. Whoa, Jack says, his eyes huge. He looks at me and points a thumb in their direction. Did you know about this? I nod, my mouth in a hard line. I sure did. Jack glances in their direction again. This is the first time Chris has ever given in to PDA. It's not PDA if it's a private room, Lexy snaps over her shoulder, then goes right back to kissing Chris. Except that it's my room, Jack counters. Neither one of them answers as they continue locking lips. Jack turns to me with wide eyes. Chris has liked her forever, but last I remember, Lexy was too afraid to even admit she liked him back. I'm not afraid of anything, Lexy shouts over her shoulder again. Except for maybe you not coming out of a coma. Jack frowns. Then he focuses on me with a worried expression. Are you all right? Of course I am, especially now that you're awake, I say with a smile. Jack sighs and reaches for my hand, which I gladly take. Tell me what happened. I take a deep breath as I hesitate. Suddenly, both Lexy and Chris stop making out and pull up a wicker chair and take a seat, as if what I'm about to say will change the course of the earth. Why don't you sit too, I suggest, on the bed? Jack obeys, as I take a seat in another wicker chair. Quick question, though, says Jack. Will I get to be in some real clothes soon? I smile. Not a fan of that gown? Not particularly. Same goes with these tubes. He lifts an arm to investigate 3 hanging cords. You'll be rid of them soon enough. Why don't you tell us everything you do remember? Jack begins and tells us what happened the last day of his life prior to his coma. It appears he has no gaps at all, with the exception of leaving the submarine handcuffed and all the horror that happened on the island. We all fall silent. Well, says Jack, what happened after that? How did we get out of that mess? No one seems to want to answer that. Not everyone got out of it, Lexy whispers. Oh, right. Jack looks to me and reaches for my hand again. He caresses my knuckles gently with his thumb. I'm sorry. I give him a small smile in return. Hey, Dr. Andrews? We all glance up at the newcomer in the doorway. Randy stands there looking surprised. Oh, I must be interrupting something. Oh, Colonel Haskins! Wow! It's great to see you, awake. Randy cringes, then glances at me for help. It's good to be seen, awake, Jack says with a half smile. Randy's cheeks flush a slight pink. Randy was one of your blood donors, I say, feeling the awkward silence. Really, Jack says. I appreciate that very much. Randy motions toward me. Sara was as well. She almost did it twice, but I stopped her. Jack glances at me, looking shocked, then back at Randy very pointedly. And I appreciate that very much. Sure thing, sir. Randy clears his throat. Sara? General Granger has someone in his office who wants to speak with you. Who is it? I ask. Ander? He looked like a kid, Randy says. Ander? Jack and Lexy say in unison. Chris turns a sharp head to look at me. Ame's son? I nod. What does he want, Randy? Randy shrugs. The general didn't give me any details, and I didn't ask since, he's the general. I'm coming with you, says Jack. I shake my head. If you go like that, Jack, I'm definitely coming too, says Chris. Lexy laughs at that, while Randy covers his laugh with a cough. I fight back a smile, but it pulls through anyway. Jack cocks his head at Chris. Very funny. Chris grins in return, unashamed. Then Jack turns to me again. Really, I want to be there. You still need IVs and fluids 24/7, I counter. I'll come right back on them, I promise, says Jack. Don't argue with the doctor, Jack, especially since she's your girlfriend now, says Lexy. It's a total lose-lose for you. Although there's no reason for me to blush, I still do. How much have you told her? Jack says to me. Told me what? Asks Lexy. Suddenly she leaps to her feet and gasps. What is this? She claps her hands and jumps up and down like a little girl. You did it, Sara! You finally came to your senses, am I right? She stops bouncing and talks with her hands. I meant the girlfriend thing as a joke, but since you're beet red, it must be official. She slaps her hands with one dramatic clap. I tried to rub the blush out of my face and come up with something witty, but Lexy's squeals distract me too much. She told me she loved me, Jack offers with a grin. Twice. Lexy shifts from little girl to linebacker as she pumps her fists in front of her and shouts in a low, gruff voice. Yes! She points a finger at me. Finally! Then she turns back to Jack. Wait, what did you say? Jack leans back on his pillow. I said it first, Lexy. Don't you know me? Well, it took you long enough, Lexy spouts. Sara wasn't ready to move on, and I respected that, says Jack. But then, I was about to die, so I had to tell her. And lucky for you, she saved your life, says Lexy. You did? Jack says to me, looking astonished. Then you saved mine, I respond. Jack opens his hands in confusion. What happened? Not to break up these happy revelations, but General Granger is still waiting for you, Sara, says Randy. He had been so quiet, I almost forgot he was in the room. Wait, get these things off me so I can come, says Jack, as he futilely attempts to detach an IV. I get to my feet. No can do, Colonel. You need your meds, and too much exertion isn't good for you right now. It's just a walk down the hall, Jack protests. That walk will be harder than you think, I tell him. Jack stands anyway and trips over something but catches himself. He's an assassin. I'm coming with you. He's just a scared kid, I counter. Jack and I both stop as we realize Lexy, Chris, and Randy are all chuckling. What? I say. Then the laughter increases before Lexy announces, It's just so hilarious to see Jack try to argue with you. He's so used to people doing whatever he wants. And tripping over his own 2 feet is very uncharacteristic. Lexy's voice turns to a squeal at the end as everyone else chuckles some more. He hasn't used a single muscle in his body for a week, I defend him. At the same time, Jack says, A man ends up in a coma and this is how his friends treat him when he wakes up. This only causes everyone to laugh some more, and Jack joins in. Chris stands and walks over to Jack, putting a hand on his shoulder. The truth is, we're just so happy to not be worried about you anymore. Your memory is still concerning, but you're still you. I was so afraid that... His voice cuts off. I'm fine, Jack says, as he pulls Chris in for a hug, and they each give each other 2 firm slaps on the back. Sara, says Randy, I just got a text from Granger that says, Where is Dr. Andrews in all caps? All right, I'm coming, I say as I head to the door. I can't wait to be yelled at by Granger again. It's one of my favorite pastimes. The group laughs at that. Come on, Sara, wait for me, says Jack. I turn to face him. He holds his arms out with a pleading look. I did wait for you, Jack. An entire week, in fact. It was torture. Thanks for waking up. I give him a wink, then follow Randy out the door, leaving low chuckles behind me. And that concludes Chapter 58. I'm so glad you're enjoying Sara's War. I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 59, which just happens to be the second to last chapter in the novel. Yes, that's right, we are coming to a close. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.